Good morning. I'm Dr. Kaaren Bierman. I'm a clinical psychologist in San Antonio, and today I'm going to be talking about divorce. Divorce, about approximately 50% of all marriages end in divorce, and that statistic may even be going up. So I think it's a really important topic to address, particularly from a mental health perspective, as far as the parents, and then particularly the children, and then also all the legal issues involved with child custody and related to the dissolution of the marriage. And usually, the median after about 7 years is usually about the time that most couples have a divorce. About 50% of divorces happen right after 7 years. A few other stats for you. 1/3 of all children are born to unwed parents, and 50% of couples cohabitate with children. Some of the consequences of divorce with children is they can have troubles adjusting. They can have emotional difficulties. They can have internalizing disorders like depression or anxiety and kind of take it all in or blame themselves. They can also have externalizing problems or behavior problems where they act out in school, act out at home. They can become defiant. They can have poor academic performance related to the adjustment to the divorce. Divorce is stressful. It increases the risk for psychological problems for both children and the adults involved. However, on the good side, most children from divorced families are resilient. But resilience is not invulnerability. And how parents manage divorce largely determines their children's resilience. So if the parents are able to resolve conflicts or make arrangements in a sane manner as far as visitation and agreeing on different things and not fighting in front of the children, then the children have a better outcome. And actually, divorce is not as deleterious to children as conflict. Living in a house with a lot of conflict, constant fighting, is actually worse on children than living in two households after divorce. In terms of the quality of parent-child relationships, some of the factors that predict better outcomes for children is how satisfied they are with their relationship with the parent, if they're getting enough affection from each parent, if they enjoy doing things with the parent, if they want to be like the parent, if they look up to their parent as a role model, and if they feel close to the parent. These are kind of protective factors as far as the quality of relationship with the parent. Some people think that children from divorce are doomed, but that's not the case. They can be more resilient. And often some of the problems that children have exist before divorce, like maybe they had academic problems before divorce, with all the conflict in the home, and then they're just exacerbated by the divorce and going through that transition. And there's a couple of differences between high conflict families and low conflict families. High conflict families, the children usually have poor adjustment at first, like going through the divorce, but then later on, 10 years later, they actually have better adjustment. And then on the other hand, in a low conflict family, there's better adjustment initially, but then 10 years down the road, there's poor adjustment, maybe because they haven't really addressed all the conflict and the pain. So again, parents really determine risk and resilience of their children's mental health. Parents can lessen their children's emotional pain. Children should be allowed to grieve. It's helpful if the parents let them talk about their feelings and what they're going through, and maybe take them in for counseling in the school or privately, so that the child has a place where they can talk about their feelings. There are support groups. In some of the schools north of San Antonio, they actually have support groups in the school where the children that have gone through divorce actually get to meet together in a group and talk about some of their feelings. Some other positive predictors are good relationships with one parent, little or controlled conflict, economic stability, and a good relationship with the other parent. One thing that's really helpful is if the parent doesn't speak negatively about the other parent, because that can put the child in such a difficult spot, particularly if one parent is pumping the other child for information about the other parent and the child wants to please both parents. And then also vast differences between the two households. If one house is really laissez-faire, they can stay up late playing video games, and the other house has much more structure. It can be difficult for the children to adjust and go back in between the households. So the more of a consistency or a united front is better. It predicts better adjustment in the children. Some of the compromises in terms of custody arrangements are joint custody. In Texas, we have a joint managing conservatorship. That's what the Texas law calls it. And the law really the most important factor is in the best interest of the child. That's what leads the law. After divorce, renegotiating family relationships has to happen. Relationships don't end with divorce. They just have to change and be altered. And set up new boundaries with the new relationship. How people handle the hurt, shame, guilt, and tension and complications of lost love and divorce is really important in terms of the children's adjustment. There's a variety of emotions. We can talk a little bit about the stages of grief. There can be shock, anger, denial, bargaining, and acceptance. And divorce is a loss for everybody involved. And so both parents and the children go through this, together. Obviously at different stages, but everybody is grieving in the event of divorce. And divorce, so it is both an emotional and a legal issue, and kids are frequently caught in the conflict. The conflict can be constructive if it's contained between the parents and the parents work things out, and if it's not emotionally intense or physically intense, and if they're able to resolve it, and if it's not about the children or in front of the children. In terms of renegotiating relationships after divorce, setting up new boundaries is really important, depending on whatever the arrangement is. If, the child lives with one parent and then they go see the other parent, the first, third, and fifth weekend of the month, and then they might have Wednesdays, and then certain holidays with the other parent. But how the parents behave at the drop-off or, when they're exchanging the children. Unfortunately, a lot of high-conflict families, they're not able to do that, so they have a couple of programs in San Antonio, like Kids Exchange, where you can go drop off the child and then leave, and then the other parent can come pick the child up 15 minutes later to avoid that conflict. And the family, even though the family has dissolved because there's children, the mom and the parents still have a connection because of that child, and it's still a system that the child has to learn to cope and learn to live in. In terms of the co-parenting relationship, that's kind of the new relationship that the parents have to define. It's helpful if they're partners in parenting, if they set up new boundaries for the new relationship, and if they, are able to grieve the loss of the relationship and then move on and be productive. And of course, take into account their children's well-being and parenting plans. If they have a parenting coordinator, someone who can help them set up their boundaries, that's really helpful. So these are just some of the psychological, and I touched a little bit on the legal issues and the emotional issues in divorce. Unfortunately, about 50% of marriages end in divorce, and this has a big impact on children. However, the good news is that the way parents handle divorce, and all the child arrangements and economics and all the different aspects can contribute to their child's resilience in being able to cope and move on. Thank you so much for joining us today. As I discussed the topic of divorce, I hope that the information is helpful for you. If you've been through a divorce, or if anyone you know is going through this. Again, my name is Dr. Kaaren Bierman. I'm a clinical psychologist in San Antonio. And if you wanted more information about me or subscribe to my newsletter, my website is drkarenbierman.com. Thank you.